What if I told you that a number can tell you so much about a country's wealth and economic health? That's right. We're talking about GDP, which stands for Gross Domestic Product. Have you ever wondered what GDP is and how it affects your daily life? Today, we are diving deep into this important topic. Understanding GDP can really help us make sense of the world around us. From the job market to the prices of goods, GDP plays a huge role in almost everything we experience financially. So, stick around as we explore what GDP really is, how it's calculated, and why it's vital for our economy. Let's kick things off with the big question. What is GDP? GDP is the total value of all goods and services produced within a country during a specific time frame. Think of it like a big cake of economic activity. The bigger the cake, the healthier the economy is considered. When people talk about a country's economic growth, they're often referring to an increase in GDP. Now, why does GDP matter so much? GDP helps us assess how well an economy is performing. It's also a key indicator used by governments and central banks to make decisions about economic policy. When GDP goes up, it typically means more jobs are being created, businesses are thriving, and people have more money to spend. On the flip side, a declining GDP could signal economic trouble, like increased unemployment and lower consumer spending. This is where understanding GDP can help us. If you know that a country is struggling economically, you might think twice before making major purchases or investments. Now that we've established what GDP is and why it's important, let's move on to how it's calculated. There are three main approaches to calculating GDP: the production approach, the income approach, and the expenditure approach. Let's break each of these down. First, we have the production approach. This method adds up the value of all goods and services produced in the country. Imagine all the cars, houses, food, and services created. You combine all that value, and you get a sense of how much the country has produced. Next is the income approach. This one looks at the total income earned by everyone in the economy. So it includes wages, profits, rents, and taxes. All of that income, when added together, gives us GDP. Finally, we have the expenditure approach, which is the most commonly used method. This approach examines how much people spend on goods and services. It includes everything from household purchases to government spending. Basically, it looks at the money flowing through the economy. Let's put that into perspective with a simple example. Imagine you live in a small town. In 1 year, your town produces a few hundred cars, sells 1 million pizzas, and builds several houses. If you take the value of all those cars, pizzas, and houses, you start to get an idea of your town's GDP. Now, what happens if people suddenly decide to stop buying pizzas? Or if the car factory closes down? Well, that would show a decrease in GDP for your town. And when local businesses are declining, that could lead to layoffs or even businesses shutting down. That's how closely tied our everyday life is to GDP. But remember, while GDP is a useful measure, it doesn't tell the whole story about well-being in a society. For instance, it doesn't account for income inequality or the value of unpaid work, like parenting or volunteering. So keep that in mind when looking at GDP figures. And by the way, have you ever thought about how GDP relates to the cost of living? When GDP grows, it can sometimes lead to higher prices as demand increases. That means what you pay for groceries, housing, and clothing might also rise. Isn't it interesting how interconnected everything is? If you're finding this information useful, hit that like button. And if you have any questions about GDP or how it affects your life, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and help clarify anything that's puzzling. So, to wrap it all up, GDP is a crucial measurement of a country's economic activity, indicating how well the economy is functioning. It gets calculated through production, income, and expenditure approaches. Understanding these concepts can empower you to make smarter financial decisions in your life. Knowledge is power, And knowing about GDP is a great tool in navigating our economic landscape. Thanks for